Welcome to Next Generation, brought to you by Salute. I'm Mark Reynolds, your host, and I'll be joined by a series of industry-leading experts throughout the series. In each episode, we'll be going beyond the headlines to unpack the forces redefining data centers and speaking with the people shaping it, scaling it, and powering it. From AI-driven demand and sustainability pressures to the evolving talent and technology powering this industry forward, one thing is clear. The data center industry is in the midst of rapid transformation. At Salute, we see this in real time, from advisory and design through to build, commission, integration, operations, and refresh. The entire life cycle is being reimagined to meet the needs of an AI-enabled world. The reality is simple. Those who adapt fastest will lead what comes next. So this podcast is about exactly that, what's next. The next generation of infrastructure, the next generation of technology, and the next generation of talent driving it all. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Next Generation podcast, powered by Salute. We are live from Data Cloud Congress in Cannes 2026. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Welcome to our Next Generation podcast. Super excited to have two great guests, Marten and Erin. So Erin, why don't you start and introduce yourself?
I'm Erin Rowe with Salute. I am a director of sustainability based out of the Netherlands, background in mechanical engineering, but have been supporting sustainability projects in the data center sector for the last 10 years or so in APAC and EMEA.
Marten from E.ON, thanks for hosting us today. I'm CEO of E.ON Energy Infrastructure Solutions, and this is one of three strategic pillars of the E.ON Group. E.ON is one of the biggest utility companies in Europe, and we are providing our customers, cities and industrial customers, including data center operators, with energy solutions throughout Europe.
Well, great. So we have a couple great questions just to make it interactive. First question, what are some of the biggest challenges data center operators are facing?
I mean, what we see in particular in these days in Cannes, if you talk to a lot of data center operators and investors, the biggest constraints is not the availability of power in itself, but the availability of grid capacity. So the constraints in the electricity grid is the biggest constraint to growth in the data center area, be it in Amsterdam, be it in London, be it in Frankfurt. It's everywhere the same. And this, I think, there are a lot of challenges around, but this is for sure the biggest at the moment. It's a hot topic at Cannes.
It's been a theme throughout the discussions. Okay. Has anything drastically changed since last year on this topic?
I think the awareness of investors and policymakers is increasing. And I see it in the reach out from data center operators and investors to us. Last year, we have been the first time here, has been already a topic there, but within the last 12 months, the awareness has become really huge on this topic. And in all continental European markets, the same is true for the US. You have already a lot of discussions since 24 months around it.
Yeah, okay. Helpful. Erin, how about you? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I would say I come at it, I'm more of a consultant to data center operators from sustainability. So I see there are the exact grid constraints that you mentioned about bringing that power online, but I think a lot of also frustration that I hear from operators on wait times and just the permitting obstacles involved with bringing power to their sites. And so then they start looking to solutions that also have like behind the meter connections that have a lot of additional hurdles related to investment and funding and regulatory requirements. So I think there's many aspects of it, regardless if you're connecting to the grid or establishing your own power generation on site or nearby. But it feels like the wait times is really the big holdup right now.
I would completely agree to that. It's a mismatch between the planning cycles of the data center operators and the planning cycles of energy infrastructure. So for data center operators, it's all about time to power, time to market as soon as possible. in the planning cycles within the energy infrastructure world, it's just a little bit longer. Sometimes related to the companies, so the utilities, but also permitting, regulation, supply chain constraints, environmental topics.
What do we need to do to change the planning cycle? How do we get that? How do we fix that?
I think there is not one easy solution to that. No, unfortunately not. Yeah? But it requires really a mindset shift. Yeah? So you have to work on different levels. You have for sure to find a new way of collaborating between data center operators, investors, policymakers, and utilities, and very important for the social acceptance also with the citizen. So the public perception of data centers is changing in the US anyway, but also in Germany. So you have to you have to integrate also the customer, the end customer, the citizen in your concept. So it's on different levels you have to work, but then there's also for sure hard work on the political framework. You could think about a privilege, for example, in the permitting for energy centers, for data centers, something like that. So there are a lot of initiatives currently ongoing.
Okay, interesting. All right. Anything to add to that, Erin?
Yeah, I would just echo that the number of stakeholders that have to be engaged is just a long list, a lot of which I have very little exposure to. But I did used to work with utilities in the U.S., 15 years ago, and that was, I think there's also in Europe a separation between you have the power suppliers, but you also have the grid, which is sometimes maintained by municipalities, sometimes it's privately owned, and that is, at least in the U.S., a really big infrastructure upgrade is needed, and that's why we're seeing a lot of pushback and power prices going up, because the ratepayers end up absorbing that cost, even though it's the data centers that are requiring that power supply and that increased demand. And so I think that's just the number of stakeholders involved and the complexities around that are really complicated.
Thank you for that perspective. So talking about ways that operators can create greater value with this energy infrastructure. Maybe Erin, since you have the microphone, I'll start with you. What are some ways that the operators can do so?
Yeah, so I work more on the demand side management. With energy efficiency is obviously a number one thing that data centers can do and invest in the design phase, as well as in existing sites to bring down that demand to be able to allocate new demand even on an existing site that can be used for IT capacity. Another thing is waste heat. I think that is something that is maybe less related to electrical energy, but a really important aspect right now because there is so much waste heat generated. And right now, most data centers is just going into the atmosphere. And so that can be recycled. There's, again, a lot of coordination with district utility companies to be able to supply that waste heat to residences or apartment buildings or industrial sites or in swimming pools. And so there's a lot of exciting innovation that can happen. But again, the stakeholders and bringing that pool of people together in communities is a lot of work. And I think that is a place where you can really have a positive spend with communities because they see the direct impact. I was speaking to somebody yesterday about one of their initiatives is using waste heat to heat a swimming pool, and then the data center also provides free swimming lessons every Friday to children in the community, and that's a great example of how you can do it the right way.
And is there one other question on the coordination? Are you seeing more and more companies are starting to bring on someone, the operators, to have manage this effort? Because it really can be a full-time position, helping coordinate all this with the community and.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I definitely think there is a public affairs kind of community engagement positioning. A lot of the time that can also fall within marketing and an expanded marketing team that kind of brings that awareness because it does feel like there's a very big disconnect in communities right now between, everyone is a user of AI and a user of cloud services, yet they're protesting data center developments, and so it's a bit of a weird place to be in, and it's an education piece, but also putting some pressure on data center operators to be responsible about development. So.
Okay, great. Marten, over to you.
fully agree with that. And I think as utilities or grid companies, we know this already since decades. Yeah, this public acceptance topic, and now the data center industry moves into the same direction. And I think there's still what can be done. Would like to give you one example from our business. We have a project called Silvertown. It's a new build area in London, where we integrated a data center in the middle of a new build area, 6,500 apartments, and those are now heated by the waste heat from the data center. And the technology innovation is that normally district heating grids have 80 degree to 100, 120 degree, and we built a new 5th generation heating grid with low temperatures, so you can directly use the waste heat at 45, 50 degree, feed it into the local grid, and heat the buildings. And this is one way to increase the energy efficiency, which is important, but at the same time, it also pays in the social acceptance topic. So this is something where we look at it, has been extremely successful in London, and we are working on different topics also in the Frankfurt area, in Berlin area, in Amsterdam. So it's an increasingly important topic.
When was that? Was that over the past year that?
That is the past year, yeah. And it changes a lot. And for example, in Germany, you already have the regulatory requirement to use 20% of the waste heat for local district heating. Then you sometimes have the question, how do you supply it in the local areas, because you have no grid, but it's another question. But I think this mandatory requirements will increasingly come all over Europe, driven by sustainability, efficiency topics.
Very fascinating. So we hear a lot about data centers moving from being passive to active energy, to active. What does this mean?
It's a big change. Honestly, it's a super big change. And for someone who is working in the energy industry since 20 years, it's something really fascinating. Because data centers in the past, or until today basically, are large consumers, passive consumers of energy. And our concept is to move them from being passive to active. And what does it mean actively is that you probably in the future have a combination of grid access, then you have a local energy production, ideally renewables based, but for a transition period probably also with gas engines. You have a BESS, battery energy storage systems in place, and you have a lot of efficiency measures. And to coordinate this, to optimize this, to actively play this in the market, so you can use the flexibility in your data center energy system also for grid stability, for other services. You can, feed electricity back to the grid. You can save grid construction costs. So that data centers will play an active part in the energy system. This is something which we see at the moment. It's a hot topic also here in Cannes at the moment, and we are pretty convinced that this is the way the whole industry will move in the next 2 to 3 years.
So one more question for you. You brought up the words grid flexibility. A lot of folks are talking about that. Not as much action in terms of implementing it. What are your thoughts on how do we really truly?
I mean, flexibility in general for the energy transition is super important. You have this renewables, intermittency, high volatility in the energy system, so you need flexible capacity in any way. And data centers can, if the energy system is designed in the right way, provide a lot of flexibility. So they can positively contribute to the stabilization of the energy system in general, and in particular to the electricity grid. And there are a lot of technological components to it, so you have to digitally, coordinate your cooling, your heating, your waste heat recovery, whatever. But at the same time, it requires also the right regulatory framework. So we work together all over Europe with the regulators to design and shape the regulatory framework in a way that data centers can actively participate in the energy market. And this is also a little bit an educational piece, but it requests also a mindset shift in the, for the policymakers and regulators. But we see a lot of awareness for that.
Okay, that's good. Progress. Erin, how about your perspective on passive to active?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to everything that you said. I think also the grid flexibility piece is something that I think there is really potential in the future to see data centers responding to changes in the kind of load profile of the utility. So, for example, if in California, they have demand response programs, which allows consumers of energy to respond to a signal when, say, the grid gets too full and they want to minimize the impact of having to bring on another power plant. And people can get a signal, and they increase their set point in their house a little bit, which shaves off enough demand that you don't have to turn on a new power plant, which is a huge cost saving. So it's energy efficiency, demand response, and I think that could apply to data centers in the future. But you'd need, especially with AI, like the loads are so varied with AI, that is there potential when you aren't having a full load instance that you can increase your temperatures in your server rooms a little bit, or your data halls, for that 15 minutes to shave that peak off. So I think there is that type of response that would be interesting. It's definitely something that I think data centers haven't broached because it's mission critical. It's 24/7 operation. There's a lot of factors in there that, especially colos, their customers would prevent. We need to be able to accommodate in the future. And then I think also on the ability to, there are lots of batteries, UPS on site, and generators and things like that to be able to pick up the load and provide power back to the grid when needed.
We're making steps.
I think we're making steps. It is, again, a bit slow, and I haven't, I don't know how there's incentive programs. There are some in the Nordics a little bit to incentivize customers to start to engage, and it might take that to kind of have two-way communication between utilities, transmission providers, and the end user to be able to get them engaged, to take a little bit of risk to see how this can work.
Great. Yeah, this is such an important topic, obviously, in terms of how we continue to grow the data center industry, but making sure that the mass public truly understands, what it is we're doing and what it is we're not doing, but also how we're supporting and evolving. And that's a big part of the community affairs, public affairs, what we're doing to get the message out, which I think we all need to have a key part in. And thanks to folks like you and your company and what you're doing, I think we need more of you. So Marten, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I think it's a super exciting time, and I think we can really, build the foundation in Europe for our own growth and digital infrastructure, and we need it for our societies, for value creation in our economy. So I think it's the right point of time to work together, to collaborate, and to push forward this topic. Yeah?
Erin, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd also say it's exciting. It's also like feels like there's a bit of a ticking clock to figure this out rather quickly. Yes. But also I think it would be a really positive use case to using AI to solve this problem of sort of grid constraints. Whereas, having smart grid systems in place would be a game changer to accommodate these new loads coming on.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you both spending time with us during the Next Generation podcast, and look forward to talking next year and seeing the progress we made. So we hope you enjoyed the Next Generation podcast powered by Salute. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast.